I've sent a card at various seasons to the Loyola community for years. So Christmas card has been the typical one, but I've sent them at different times of the year, an Easter card. And this year we had this thought of, what if we did a card at Thanksgiving as sort of a season of Thanksgiving? Let's try to bring people's attention to being grateful, to being thankful. Well, what captures gratitude for me is when people pray the Examen. That the Examen is this fundamental Ignatian way of being grateful. If I pay attention to what's going on in my life, I'll recognize God present in my life. I'll recognize the things that I'm ultimately grateful for, and then it moves me to service. It moves me to generous service. So we had that conversation talking about the Examen, and as I was talking to one of my staff people, I said, you know, when I walk around the building and witness our school doing the Examen every day, I often think of this painting that's I think you'd know it if you saw it, but it's simply called Angelus, which is, Angelus is a prayer that's prayed in the Catholic tradition a couple of times a day, specifically at noon and at 6 o'clock evening. And it's a pause, and it's a prayer, and it's the angel saying to Mary, "You will conceive a child," and it's a prayer of great praise. Well, there's this wonderful painting, and I didn't know the name of the artist at the time, but there's a wonderful painting of a couple in a field. They're farmers, and it's a husband, presumably a husband and a wife, and it's dusk, and they've just stopped where they are, and they're looking down, and they're clearly in a reflective pose. And I said, that's what I always think of when I watch the Examen at Loyola, when I see kids and faculty and staff stop in the hallways to be reflective and to pray. So I thought of that painting and said, gee, I'd love to capture that spirit somehow in what we do in the card. So then I talked to Mrs. Carney in the art department and said, I have this idea, and we had sort of talked tentatively about what that might look like. And then I saw Eric's work on the wall at the corner down by the chapel, and it was, the first thing I saw was his portrait of Mr. Field. He had done when the AP art students do the profile of a faculty member here, which I always love that project every year. His just stopped me in my tracks because it looked like a photograph. It was so perfect. I thought, oh, well, they've now started doing photographs of these things. And when you looked closer, you realized, no, whoever this student is, he or she, spent an awful lot of time perfecting with a pencil this extraordinary image. And there was so much about it that was interesting. It's a spectacular work, as the others on the wall were, but Eric's really caught my attention. And so in talking to Mrs. Carney, I said, this is the guy that has to do my card for Thanksgiving. Do you think he'd be willing to do this? Would he let me commission him to do this? And so began the conversation with Eric.
I was approached by Elizabeth O'Connor for permission to use my Mr. Field teacher portrait in the Loyola calendar. And it was during that meeting that she said that Father McGrath had expressed interest in my art and that he was interested in seeing whether or not I would want to draw a piece for his Thanksgiving card. I was really honored by the offer, but I was also kind of scared of the magnitude of the request. The prompt was to draw a piece that demonstrated prayer in your daily life, similar to Loyola's Examen. And when I first heard it, I just thought it was so general and difficult to wrap my head around. But as I thought about it more and more, I thought more of the Loyola Examen during 8th period and the forced pause in our life. After taking a bunch of pictures, I decided on the one that I liked. And then I used a mix of graphite pencils and black-colored pencils to make the picture. I started with the faces and then did the bodies, and then from there worked to the background. And it took about 18 to 20 hours worth of work.
Then I had great trust that he was going to come back with something great. Well, he came back with something extraordinary, I think. He captures in that image in the main lobby there, in the shadow of the statue of St. Ignatius, he captures that sense of the Angelus. He captures that sense of there are points in the day where it's profitable for us to pause. It makes sense for people who believe that there's more going on in life than meets the eye, for people who are convinced of God's presence in our world. You need to stop and reflect. It's just beautiful. I love the different postures and positions of the students who are featured in it. I love that it's so perfectly done, and you know who these students are. If you know who these kids are in the hallways, that's them, and they're captured perfectly there. And each of them, in their own way and in their own posture, are just wonderfully reflective, and it evokes, I think, this tremendous sense of pause in the midst of a busy school, in the crossroads, in this part of the lobby or the hallway where everybody passes usually at a pretty fast pace to get somewhere. They've stopped, they've paused, they're praying, and Eric just captures that in a way that I think is phenomenal. And the card was mailed, I think last Friday it dropped in the mail, and I've started to get responses from people. And just yesterday I got 2 emails, one from a faculty member here and one from a person I don't know personally but who's on my card list. I think this was mailed to something like 6,000 or 7,000 people. And somebody wrote me and said, this just stopped me. As I opened this card, I had to stop to look at the picture. So the picture now, the art of Eric, is now having the effect of the subject. It's bringing the viewer to the same kind of pause that the people featured in the picture are doing. And to do that is just bonus to the whole thing. It's brought it full circle, and I think he's done an amazing job of doing what I asked him to do.